the beginning of Perek Daled Milchas Talmud Torah, and the Rambam differentiates in the Reisha between a Talmud Hagun and a Talmud Sheino Hagun. In the Sefer, he uses a slightly different lashon regarding the Rav. He's got to be a Rav Shaholef B'derech Tova. You can't learn with him if he's not Domer L'Malach Hashem Tzvakos. B'lineder, we'll get back to that. The different lashonos in the Rambam, in the Reisha, and the Sefer. But I want to call your attention to the issue of the Rambam's what seems to be a neglect to the sugya in Chagiga about Rabbi Meir, who learned from Acher, and the Gemara says Gadol Shiny. And the question that we raised last time, which I want to get back to again today, is could it be possible that the Rambam omits the halacha of Gadol Shiny here in Hilchos Talmud Torah, but nevertheless has it elsewhere? He codifies it in Hilchos Rotzeach. And I base myself on the fact that the source for the Rambam is quoted by the Mefarshim for the halacha of not learning Torah, not teaching Torah to a Talmud Sheino Hagun, perhaps not learning Torah from a Rebbe Sheino Hagun, is a sugya in Makos on Daf Yud, which the Rambam codifies in Hilchos Rotzeach, Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph. We'll start by reading the Gemara and then we'll read the Rambam. They're almost identical word for word, but it's important to read the Gemara first because the Aruch LaNer has a very important diuk in the Gemara, a kasha, which leads him to a radical conclusion. The Gemara says the following. Tana, we learned in a Braisa, Talmud Shegola Megalin Rabo Imo Shenemar V'chai Ovid Le Midi D'Tehevi Le Chiyusa Om Rab Zeira Mikan Shlo Yeshana Adam L'Talmid Sheino Hagun. Since we're going to force, as it were, the Rav to go into Golus, he's got to, so to speak, drop everything in his life, pack his bags, and resettle in the Miklat because his Talmud killed B'Shogeg. Mikan, says Reb Zera, from this we could derive the conclusion Shelo Yishana Adam L'Talmud Sheino Hagun. Because at the end of the day, look at the repercussions. Where are you going to end up? Then the Gemara goes on and quotes Rabbi Yochanan. Harav Shegola Megalin Yeshiva Soimo. So the flip side is that if the Rav goes into Golus, the Talmidim go after him. They follow suit. So the Aruch LaNer asks the obvious question. Why did the Gemara, Rabbi Zera, derive the principle of Al Yeshana Adam L'Talmud Sheino Hagun from the Braisa, namely from the fact that the Rebbe's going to have to go into Golus with his Talmud, and yet we don't find that within the context of Rabbi Yochanan's statement that a Rav Shegola Megalan Yeshivaso Imo, a similar or an analogous deduction, namely that you shouldn't learn from a Rav Sheino Hagun, because again the same logic applies in both. If you study at the feet of a Rav Sheino Hagun, you can end up packing your bags, following him into the Yer Miklat. Now, we want to add another kasha to the Aruch LaNer that might lead us in the same direction, and that's the Rambam's lashon. The Rambam, when he codifies the halacha in Hilchos Rotzeach, Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, he quotes the pasuk V'chai Bohem, V'chai, but yet he wedges that pasuk in between the Reisha, the case of a Talmud Shegola, when the Talmud killed B'Shogeg, and the Sefer, the case when the Rav killed B'Shogeg. V'zel L'shono. Talmud Shegola li'orei miklat megalin rabo imo shenemar v'chai. Aselo kidei sheyichye. V'chai balei chochma Umevaksheh below Talmud kimisa chashuvim. The Rambam feels compelled to add this very elaborate explanation that underlies this halacha. Why do we send the Rebbe into Golus with his Talmud? Because the Talmud cannot achieve life. Again, we're not talking about physical life. There are many other Gemaras in the same parak in Makkos that deal with how we have to supply and maintain the physical existence of the Talmud. But here we're talking about the spiritual oxygen. Is Bale Chaye Bale Chochma Ksher below Talmud Kimisa Chashuvim. Perhaps we'll talk about the double language of the Rambam, Bale Chochma Umevaksheha. And then, only at the end of this halacha, does the Rambam address Harav Shegola Megalin Yeshivaso Imo, which seems to be perhaps even a more far-reaching halacha, and yet the Rambam gives no explanation. He doesn't quote the pasuk. Everything seems to adhere in the word v'chein. The fact that the Rambam combined these two halachas into one, would indicate that the underlying reason for the Reisha, for the din of Talmud Shegola, we send the Rebbe into Golus, with the din of the Seifa, the Rebbe Shegola is Magal Yeshiva Soimo. So it would seem that the logic derived from the pasuk v'chai, Aselo Kadesh Yichye, would apply in both cases, and yet the Rambam, instead of logically putting it at the end, so that it would be Musav on both the Reish and the Sefer, he puts it in the middle. Very strange. The Aruch LaNer, based on his kasha, comes to a very, very revolutionary conclusion. And that is that there's a fundamental difference between the two cases. Lahalocha. In the first case, the Rav has to go into Golus. It's an absolute chiyuv. No questions, no choice decision. In the Seifa, sending the Talmidim into Golus to be with their Rebbe, that's an option. That's not obligatory. And therefore, when the Gemara sees the halacha of Rabbi Yochanan, that Rav Shegola Megalin Yeshivaso Imo, the Gemara cannot possibly justify the conclusion Mikan Shein Mislamdin Mi Rav Shein Ohogun, because at the end of the day, the Talmidim will have a choice decision. They can either opt to go into the Ir Mikla with their Rav, or they can find a different Rav to substitute for the first. Therefore, we cannot recommend the Talmud to be so picky and choosy about who his Rav is. In the worst case scenario, if the Rav Chashon murders B'Shogeg inadvertently, the Talmud doesn't have to go into Golus. He doesn't have to radically change his lifestyle. He can remain in his own local town. What we derive from this Aruch LaNer, and again, I don't know that there are any other interpretations of the Gemara Makkos. I assume there probably are, but for our purposes, we're going to buy into the Aruch LaNer. Not just because we're gigantic fans of the Aruch LaNer, but because we are impressed by, almost compelled, it's almost together mafata, I would call it. I wouldn't call it honest, but it's certainly by the compelling argument that really explains why the Gemara doesn't derive from Rabbi Yochanan that you shouldn't learn by a Rebbe Sheino Hagun, because you'll have that option. But I'd like to take this a step further and explain what really underlies this distinction that the Aruch LaNer is presenting between the case of Talmud Shegola and the case of Rav Shegola. In the case of in the case of Talmud Shegola, we'll take the Reisha first. If not for this halacha v'chai, what would be the situation? What would be the halacha as far as the Rav is concerned? Do we send him off to the Ir Miklat to teach this Talmud? Well, let's first ask, is there any Isur in doing so? Do we have a prohibition that enjoins the Rav from teaching this Talmud? He's a Talmud Sheino Hagun. Is he justified in teaching him? So here we want to introduce, as we've mentioned many times, the Divrei Yirmiyahu, who is very careful about the Rambam at the beginning of Perek Dalet and says that the Rambam puts all the emphasis on Beis HaMedrash. The influence of a Talmud Sheino Hagun on the other Talmidim in the Beis HaMedrash is something that the halacha could not tolerate. On the other hand, if we send a Rav into Golus with that individual Talmud, then the underlying reason for not teaching, for prohibiting a Rav from teaching a Talmud Shadog falls off. Because now you're teaching him privately in the Ir Miklat. If that be the case, then what do I need this Chiddush of V'chai, asay imo, asay lo kidei sheyichya? We don't need it as a matir, because again, we're not talking about the public Beit Midrash type learning. There's no Isur involved at all. So there was no Salkadaitach that would be an Isur. So what's the Kamashal of V'chai? What does this halacha teach us? Well, if it doesn't teach us a heter, if it's not alleviating, removing an Isur, then it must be teaching a chiyuv. Says the Aruch LaNer, the Rav has no choice but to go into the Ir Miklat, because otherwise there's no fulfillment of the pasuk V'chai. Right? He should run, he should flee to the Ir Miklat V'chai. However, let's look at the next case. The Rav is going out to the Ir Miklat. Do the Talmidim go with him? Now, before we ask the question of chiyuv, let's ask the question of heter. What would be our logical conclusion before this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan that the Rav codifies here at the beginning of Perek Zayin? Would the Talmidim be allowed to go to the Ir Miklat? And the answer is no. There would be an Isur. Because the difference between teaching a Talmud She'eino Hagud, which we said according to Divrio is permissible outside the confines of the Beis HaMedrash, and the case of learning at the feet of a Rav, is that in the second case, we're not limited in the scope of this Isur to the Beis HaMedrash. Even outside the Beis HaMedrash, if the Rav is Eino Hagud, al Yivakesh Torah Mipiu, the impact that the Rav could have on this Talmud, if he's a sensitive soul, the Talmud, and perhaps with a Kal V'chomer, if he's private learning with her, is something that the halacha is very careful about. Oh, if that be the case, then perhaps what the Aruch LaNer is saying is that we cannot impose a chiyuv on the Talmidim to pack their bags and join the Rav near Miklat. There's no makar for that. There's no source for that. All we can derive from V'chai is that since the Rav killed B'shogeg, since he has to go into the Ir Miklat, since we have to provide him the oxygen, the Talmidim are allowed to study at the feet of this Rav, even though he's a Rav She'eino Hagud. Normally it would be Asur, even on a private basis, but here the Torah was matter. Perhaps, if that be the case, if that's what underlies the distinction between the Aruch LaNer, between a Talmud Shegola and a Rav Shegola, according to the Aruch LaNer, that the pasuk V'chai in the case of Talmud Shegola is not telling me a heter, therefore, by process of elimination, it can only be telling me a chiyuv. Whereas in the case of Rav Shegola, we need the pasuk to teach me a heter. There is no chiyuv on the part of the Talmidim. Each Talmud to make his own choice decision. Oh, if that be the case, then maybe we can understand why the Rambam wedges V'chai between the Reisha and the Sefer. We could answer our second question. In the Reisha of Talmud Shegola, the Rambam wants to establish a chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav to go into the Ir Miklat with his Talmud. Therefore, he quotes the pasuk V'chai. This is an absolute chiyuv. But had the Rambam added the V'chein HaRav Shegola, according to the Aruch LaNer, we have a problem. Because if the Rambam would have added the V'chein HaRav Shegola, is the Talmidim go with him, Shenemar V'chai, then the conclusion would be that just like in the Reisha, the Rav has to go into the Ir Miklat, in the Sefer, the Talmidim have to go into the Ir Miklat. It would be an absolute chiyuv, it would be compelled upon them. Therefore, the Rambam, to go out of his way, he puts V'chai, Shenemar V'chai, in the middle, to distinguish between the Reisha and the Sefer. The Reisha is a chiyuv, Shenemar V'chai. The Sefer is a heter, and the V'chein that links the Reisha with the Sefer is telling me that the underlying reason for this heter is the same as the reason that justifies the chiyuv in the Reisha for the Talmidim to go. And the Rambam formulates it in beautiful, flowery, dramatic language. Because he says, Chaye balei chochma v'aksher below Talmud kimisa chashuvim. By the way, what kind of Talmidim are we dealing with here? We're talking about young children, Tashbar, or are we talking about more advanced children? The Rambam used the word Talmud. What's Talmud referring to? Not Torah Shebechsav, but rather Torah Shebal Peh. Whenever the Rambam uses the word Talmud, it's a deliberate decision. He wants to indicate we're talking about older Talmidim who are studying Torah Shebal Peh. For these older Talmidim, we could describe them as Chaye Balei Chochma V'Vaksher. Last time we suggested that Balei Chochma might refer to the Rav. He's already a Baal Chochma. Mevaksher might refer to the Talmidim. They're Mevakshe Torah. They're not yet in the Darga of Balei Chochma. But perhaps we could suggest something else. And here I want to raise a question. The Rambam seems to imply that in the case of Rav Shegola, all the Talmidim are going to pack out and join the Rav in the Ir Miklat. Yeshivas Ima. Why? I don't get it. I understand that the Rav needs his Talmidim, but I also understand that each individual Talmud is now faced with a choice decision, weighing the pros and the cons. Should he pack his bags, go to the Rav? The Rav is very miyuchad, he's very unique. The Talmud is attached to him, or maybe no. Maybe substitute. Find a different Rav. Why should you pack your bags? Why do you uproot yourself and relocate yourself? As the Aruch LaNer says, it's only a heter to learn by this Rav. But perhaps we could say something else. That the heter for the Talmud to go to the Ir Miklat and study at the feet of a Rav Sheino Hagud who killed B'Shogeg, he was negligent, he was Poshea, Chaye Nefesh, Chavero weren't so, Yakar Beinov, Yakarim Beinov. What's the heter based on? And the answer is Chay Balei Chochma U'Mevaksher. Perhaps both Balei Chochma and Mevaksher in the Rambam are referring to the Talmud who's making this choice decision. And what I mean to suggest is that since we're dealing with older Talmidim who are studying Talmud, who are studying Torah Shebal Peh, these Talmidim have reached the level of Balei Chochma. They're not beginners. They're not starting with a pasuk in Chumash. They're advanced in their studies. The Rambam wants to tell you that sometimes the Balei Chochma can be described not just on the basis of what they've achieved and the amount of knowledge they've amassed in Torah, but also by their level of motivation, by their level of how much they need the Torah. And therefore the Rambam adds the words Mivaksher. Both with regard to the Reisha and with regard to the Sefer, the underlying heter or chiyuv is going to be based on the fact that these Talmidim need v'chai. They need to have life, spiritual life. They've reached the level in which if you don't offer them teaching of Talmud, then it's k'misehem chashuvim. Those are the mavakshe Torah. Except that there's one fundamental difference between the Reisha and the Sefer. In the Reisha, what we're saying is that v'chai generates an absolutely compelling halacha. We must afford the the Talmud, with the wherewithal to live. So we must send the Rav into Golus with his Talmud. Shenemar v'chai. As the Aruch LaNer says, it's a no-choice situation. It's compulsory. The Rav has to go. In the Sefer, each Talmud is going to make his decision. But on what basis is he going to make his decision? And the answer is, does he live up, does he measure up to the standards of Chaye Balei Chochma V'Vaksher below Talmud K'Misehem Chashuv? In other words, the Rambam drops the word Shenemar in the Sefer. He's deriving in the Sefer an entirely different conclusion. But it's based on a Gili Milsa that was granted to us, that was revealed to us in the halacha that underlies the Reisha. There are Tzvei Dinim here. The V'chein in the Rambam, equating the Reisha and the Sefer, is meant to achieve the following goal. When the Rebbe goes into Golus in the Sefer, why should the Talmud decide to go with him? Isn't the Talmud enjoined from studying from a Rav She'eino Hogun? What's the matir on that Isur? And the answer is, the Rambam says, let's look into the Parsha of Golus. Let's see what standards the Torah sets for V'chai, for guaranteeing the life of the Rotzeach in the Ir Miklat in a way that he shouldn't be denied life. If the Torah requires that the Rav pack his bags and go into the Ir Miklat for the sake of his Talmud V'chai, then we can derive from that, says the Rambam, a far-reaching conclusion about how the Torah views the need for this Rav-Talmud relationship to continue. If the Talmud, who's a Mavakesh Torah, without his Rebbe, his life is Kemisa, then the Torah says the Rebbe has no choice. He's got to fulfill the mitzvah of Hatzalas Nefasha, so to speak, within the context of Ir Miklat. He's got to create an environment in the Ir Miklat in which the Talmud can thrive, can survive, and therefore he's compelled, like it or not, to move to the Ir Miklat. Says the Rambam, if that be the case, if the Torah within the context of V'chai, of Ir Miklat, considers the need for the Talmud to have his Rebbe and to continue that relationship with his Rebbe, to be considered of the utmost importance, it reaches the level of what? Of V'chai, then what do we do with the case of a Talmud who, in order to learn by his Rebbe, will have to learn by his Rebbe even if the Rebbe is Eino Hog? After all, the Torah prohibits it. Im domu l'malach Hashem tzvakos Torah yivakesh mipiyu, but if not, al yivakesh Torah mipiyu. Says the Rambam, the Parsha of Golus has revealed to us a brand new definition of, what shall I say, v'chai b'hem, of pikuach nefesh. Again, it's not the v'chai b'hem of kol Torah kula, which is primarily physical. Does it apply in spiritual cases? You know, the famous Ramah about being Machal Shabbos for someone that's being taken away by the missionaries. Okay, that's a different discussion. But certainly we have to admit that fundamentally V'chai B'hem is in the physical realm. There's a new Parsha V'chai that relates to and reveals something about the nature of the relationship between Rav and Talmud. Where is that new Parsha V'chai? It's in Ir Miklat. And it's no geya to arranging the Ir Miklat, the life in the Ir Miklat in a way that facilitates life and not chas v'shalom the opposite. And the Torah requires us to do so, and that chiyuv now falls on the shoulders of the Rav. Says the Rambam, if the Torah views the relationship, the dependence of the Talmud on his Rebbe, as something that borders on life or death, it's v'chai, at least within the perspective of the Parsha of Ir Miklat v'chai, the Torah obligates the Rav to pack his bags and go into the Ir Miklat for the sake of the Talmud. Then for the sake of that same dependency and need on the part of the Talmud for his Rebbe, we're going to alleviate, we're going to permit and give license to the Talmud to go into the Ir Miklat, to learn Torah from a Rav She'eino Hogun because of this new Parsha of V'chai. And if this pshat is correct, then perhaps we understand the original question that we asked: why does the Rambam drop the ball on the Gemara in Chagiga, Rabbi Meir and Acher, of Gadol Shiny? The answer is because the Rambam feels that Gadol Shiny and Rabbi Meir is a reflection of a brand new kind of matir, a matir that we're not familiar with anywhere. In other words, as far as the Isur in Hilchas Talmud Torah of him eino domo l'malach Hashem tzvakos al yevakesh Torah mipiyu, that Isur is absolute. You want to find a new matir? Find a new matir. So what's going to be the matir? What's going to allow this Talmud to study under the tutelage of this Rav She'eino Hogun? How can you alleviate this Isur? In Hilchas Talmud Torah, there's no answer to that question. You're going to have to find some other kind of a matir. And that matir, I believe the Rambam codifies in the Parsha of Ir Miklat, because the source, the origin for this new matir, is that separate, unique Parsha of Pikuach Nefesh of V'chai that was formulated by the Torah in the context of organizing, arranging Ir Miklat that will facilitate life and not the opposite. Within that context, the Rambam derives the principle that would underlies the v'chai to force the Rebbe to pack his bags and go into the Miklot is that chaye balei chochma u'mevaksher below Torah k'misahim chashuvin. And here the Rambam derived a halacha that parallels, that reflects the case of Rabbi Meir and Acher, that if you are a true, genuine mevakesh Torah, and what's the litmus test? How do I measure you to this standard of being mevakesh Torah? That we would apply for you the halacha of v'chai that would force the Rebbe to go into your miklot for you. If you reach that madrig, that measure, then that's the v'chai that could allow you, Rabbi Meir, I'm using Rabbi Meir as an example, of course, to violate the isur of al yevakesh Torah mipiu and learn at the feet of a Rav she'eino. I don't know. Every time I say this over, I convince myself more and more that it's right. But again, it's not 100% smooth. We're still bothered by the original kasha of Megal and Yeshiva. So I'm model emes. That lashon of the Gemara and the Rambam is very difficult. I came up with some fantastical idea, but I would need support for this. That the word Yeshiva is used by the Rambam to indicate something that's not compulsory. In other words, there's something called Tinoko Shel Beis Rabban that's compulsory. We're not going to ask the child whether he wants to or not. And then in the more advanced level, the word yeshiva, which I don't know that the Rambam uses elsewhere, when he's not referring to sitting, but to a Torah institution, is employed by the Rambam to convey the message that the Talmud is old enough, mature enough to decide which yeshiva he wants to learn with. So the Rambam goes out of his way to quote the halach of yeshiva in order to convey, to indicate that each Talmud individually will decide what yeshiva he wants to go to. Again, I'm influenced by the Aruch LaNer, who says that you can't force the Talmud to pack his bags, go into your mikvah. Maybe he'll find a different ring. Okay. That's point number one. And now, I want to go on to point number two. The Rambam in Halacha Aleph of Perek Daled, and we've discussed this in the past, has a Reish and a Sefer. I'm very bothered by the fact that the Reish and the Sefer do not seem to be mirror images of each other. In the case of the Sefer, we'll work our way backwards. The Rambam begins the Sefer with the Shenemar, in the case of Rav She'eino Holech B'derech Tova, and he concludes with Amru Chachamim. We suggested that the Rambam is trying to generate two different halachos, the most fundamental of which, derived from Shenemar, is that a Rav cannot be appointed as the Moser HaTorah B'Rabim if he's Eino Holech B'derech Tova. That was the Shenemar, and the Amru Chachamim adds an addendum, perhaps a secondary halacha, that even on a private level, you cannot be mevakesh Torah mipi. I would have expected, therefore, flipping now back to the Reisha, and the Reisha and the Sefer, keep in mind, are hooked together with the word v'chein, that the Reisha should likewise reflect two different halachos. Except they have one problem. There's no shenemar in the Reisha. However, I don't want to die from that kasha of why the Rambam leaves out the word shenemar. I'd like to rather put that on the back burners for just one moment, and perhaps suggest, and I know I'm arguing here with my favorite commentary on the Rambam, the Divrei Yirmiyahu, that maybe with regard to a Talmud She'eino Hagen, there are likewise two halachos. And I base myself on the Arichas Lashon of the Rambam. He starts by talking about being machzir this Talmud lemutav, and then and only then, after you check him out, you allow him to enter into the Beit Midrash with the other Talmidim. But then he goes on to speak about a pasuk in Mishlei, and he says that you can compare teaching a Talmud She'eino Hagun to a Zorek Evel Markolis, and he quotes the pasuk, "No saying l'ksil kavod, ain't kavod el Torah." So this Talmud, who could be described in the very often used term of Shlomo HaMelech and Mishlei as a ksil, this Talmud She'eino Hagun is being given kavod. But what's kavod? Torah. Don't give, the Rambam says, kavod, meaning Torah, to the ksir. Perhaps the Rambam is adding here a very important issue. That not only are you enjoying as a Rav from teaching this Talmud within the confines of the Beit Midrash, in the public Mesiras HaTorah, but there's an additional aspect. Don't give kavod to the ksir. I don't care whether you're giving that kavod, you're dishing it out publicly in the Beit Midrash, or privately by offering, maybe with a kal v'chomer. If you take him on as your private, under your private tutelage, maybe that's even a greater violation of nesinas kavod l'ksir. So therefore I maintain a mirror image between the Reish and the Sefer. In both cases, the Rambam wants to indicate a primary Isur and a secondary Isur. The primary Isur being confined to Mesiras HaTorah l'Rabim, with the Talmidim in the Beit Midrash. We have to be very careful about the influence here of a Talmud Sheino Hagun. In the case of the Rav Sheino Hagun, it's a Psul Gavra that we discussed. Who can give him the rights to be the Moser HaTorah to the next generation of Talmidim? But in addition to those primary Isurim, the Rambam generates two secondary Isurim. Both in the Reisha with regard to teaching a Talmud Sheino Hagun, in this case outside the confines of the Beit Midrash. There too you violate the secondary Isur derived from Mishlei of Nosein Kavod L'Ksir. And in the case of a Rav Sheino Hagun, you want to study under his tutelage outside the Beit Midrash, you can't do so. Because perhaps his influence, his impact on you as a Talmud will be even that much greater when you're learning with him privately. And therefore the Rambam quotes the Al Yavakesh Torah Mipi. However, now we have to come full swing back to my original question. And that is, whereas in the Sefer the Rambam has the Shenemar, and clearly derives the primary Isur from a pasuk, in the Reisha regarding Talmud Sheino Hagun, he drops the ball and completely omits the word Shenemar. He has the Shenemar in the Sefer with regard to Nosein Ksil, Nosein Torah L'Ksil, Nosein Kavod L'Ksil, but that, as we said, is a secondary Isur. In the primary Isur, the Rambam doesn't quote any pasuk. Now, Rabbos, I hope you'll be mochel me for talking to you like young students here, but just a simple rule of thumb. If the Rambam leaves out Shenemar, because the Rambam consistently will always quote Shenemar, he didn't have to do so. You see how much of a lamdan the Rambam was. If he was just codifying, hardcore halachas, he wouldn't have to add the word Shenemar, but he always does so. When he doesn't do so, what lamdisha tool should we apply? What conclusion should we derive from the Rambam's omission of the word Shenemar? No, I wouldn't say that. It might be Doraisa, but it would be what? A din kloli and not a din misui. In other words, the Rambam will omit the word Shenemar when there's no need for the Shenemar, because we're not introducing a brand new halacha. You could have already derived that halacha from general rules. So what I want to do now, and I gave it to you in the Maimar Kovos, is to go back to an earlier Rambam that perhaps might set the tone for this halacha of not teaching a Talmud Sheino Hagun where, again we're talking about the beginning of halacha Aleph, in the Beit Midrash. And here I want to refer you to the Rambam in Hilchos Deos. The Rambam in Hilchos Deos, as you all know, dedicates a lot of time to the mitzvah of the halachta b'drachav. How can a man imitate God? And within this broader context of the mitzvah of halachta b'drachav, the Rambam writes, this you'll see in Perek Vav Halacha Aleph, derech briyaso shel adam lios nimshach b'deosav uvemasav achareav v'chaverov. The impact of one's associates and his friends on his spirituality, on his deos, on his midos. Lefichach tzarich adam lischaver litzadikim v'leishev etzel chachamim. Tamid. He has the word tamid. Kidei sheyilmad mimaseim v'yisrachik bin harashayim aholchim b'choshech kidei shelo yilmad mimaseim. And then the Rambam applies this globally in terms of what Medina you should be living in, not just what neighborhood or who you sit with in the lunchroom. And the Rambam in Perek Alf Bilchos Deos quotes the pasuk v'halachta b'drachav. Could it therefore be possible that the Rambam here at the beginning of Perek Daled, and I'm very excited about this, you'll take a look in the Yad Pshuta if you get a chance of Rav Nochem Rabinovich, the Rambam here is falling back on a different Shenemar that he had earlier, namely V'alachta b'drochav. What we're seeing here then at the beginning of Perek Daled in Hilchos Talmud Torah is nothing more than a specific application of a general rule. The Talmud Sheino Hogan, if we allow him in the Beis Midrash, together with the other Talmidim, is a violation of the rule of V'alachta b'drochav. Because a person is mischaver derech briyasel yos nimshach, he's nimshach b'deyosav u'b'masav achareyav v'chaverov. Now you'll ask me, if this be the case, so why does the Ram feel compelled to quote this halach in Hilchos Talmud Torah? Is it just because this is a very practical, how should I say, hardcore, concrete example of V'alachta b'drochav, of Leos nimshach achar deya achar perhaps we would say that within the context of Talmud Torah, we're going to have to overlook this requirement of being mischaver with reim, tovim, and tzaddikim and so forth, because we have to learn Torah. Perhaps we could add that this Talmud is showing up in the Beis Midrash. He has a desire to learn Torah. Maybe it's a yeshiva. Nobody forces him to go. And perhaps Talmud Torah outweighs the chashash, because we don't know definitely that he's going to be mashpia on the other Talmidim. Maybe also he's batel b'shishim, maybe there's 60 students in the class, he's only one. But there are many different havaminas that one could suggest, and the Rambam therefore has to formulate this halakha to teach us that throw out all those havaminas, leave out all those machshavos, and leave out this Talmud Sheino Hog. If that be the case, the Rambam leaves out shenemar, but it's a din d'oraisa, and it's an application of the general universal principle of V'alachta b'drochav. Then the Rambam picks up Kizorek Erven Lemarkolis. Here the Rambam is forced to quote a pasuk, because the Rambam doesn't quote a pasuk. If the Rambam is falling back on universal principles, then why can't I teach this Talmud outside the Beis Midrash? The Divri Yos says I can. We're claiming we cannot, because you're a nosein covered l'ksil. And here the Rambam has to teach me that outside the Beis Midrash, you're not supposed to be teaching a Talmud she'eino hog. Perhaps the Rambam wants to also teach me in the Sefer, in the case of a Rav. So number one, we cannot, as we said, appoint him as the Rav Hamalami La Rabim Bebeis HaMedrash because of the prestige and the significance and the inherent halacha of Mesiras HaTorah. But the Rambam wants to tell me in the Sefer that Omru Chachamim, a person shouldn't even be mevakesh Torah from a Rav b'yechidus outside the Beis HaMedrash, because the Rav will be mashpia on him. That too is an application of the universal halacha of influence, of impact. And if we say that a person is impacted by his chaverim, kol shkein, how much is he impacted by his Rebbe? He watches his Rebbe carefully. We're going to see that later on in this parak, that you have to facilitate the Talmidim see the Rebbe, and he imitates his Rebbe, his maisim, his hashkafos, and so forth. This is a great danger if the Rav is holich b'derech lo tova. But the Rambam nevertheless feels compelled to formulate this halach and teach us that even though it's at stake here is a Rav who's a chacham shakal tzrichim lo, we all need him. He's a chacham gadol. Or even if the Talmidim are gedolim, they're more mature, maybe not at the level of Misa v'chayim that we spoke about, but nevertheless they're mature enough to take the good and leave out the bad. And the Rambam tells me, no, you should not be mevakesh Torah mipi. So just to summarize our second point for today, we present what we consider to be a mirror image here between the Reish and the Sefer, linked up, hooked up by the word v'chein, Both in the Reisha there are two dinim, and in the Sefer there are two dinim. Both in the Reisha there is a primary din d'oraisa, an isur d'oraisa of teaching, in this case, the Talmud She'eino Hagun, and a secondary isur of Amru Chachamim. The first being inside the Beit Midrash, the second being on a private level. So too, in the Sefer, there's a primary isur derived from a pasuk shenemar, and that is not to appoint this Rav as the teacher of a Rabbim, to be Mosed Torah, and a secondary isur, which the Chachamim postulate not to be Mevakesh Torah, even be Yechidus, which is derived from the logic that the Rambam really employs at the beginning of Halacha Aleph, with regard to inviting the Talmud She'eino Hagun to participate with the other Talmud in the Beit Midrash, based on what he's written in Hilchos Deis, Perek Aleph, Perek Vav, about V'alachta b'drachav and the impact and the influence of evil within the context of social relationships. And now I want to go on to point number 3. The Rambam says, with regard to a Talmud She'eino Hagun, that if he's holech b'derech lo tova, machzirno so lemutav, and then we could allow him in the Beit Midrash. Here's my question to you. Machzirno so lemutav, I think you'll have to grant me, sounds like a chiyuv. Machzirno so lemutav. It's not that chas v'shalom we leave this Talmud who's Eino Hagun outside in the cold and throw him to the dogs, and say we don't care about you. That we're not going to do. But machzirno so lemutav. But my question to you, Rabbi Azarya, is upon whom is this obligation of machzirno so lemutav incumbent? Is it incumbent upon every single Jew, or at least the community as a tzibur, or is it incumbent on the Rav? Because the Rambam could very well be referring to some sort of chiyuv klali of hocheach tochiach es amisecha, as the Rambam says again. We're going back to Hilchos Deos, Perek Vav Halacha Zayin, and I quote to you the Rambam: "Haroeh chavero shechata o holach b'derech lo tova." It's exactly identical language. Derech lo tova, mitzvah lachziro lemuta ulodia shu chote al atzmo. Shenemar hocheach tochiach es amisecha. And therefore I would submit to you that the Rambam is not talking about a separate chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav, but really he's mentioning or alluding to the general universal chiyuv incumbent upon everyone, because you see your friend going b'holif b'derech lo tov. However, here I would like to study with you a different Rambam. And this is the Rambam referring to the isur of inui almanos v'yisom. As we all know, the Torah is very, very strict about treating these umlolim, these unfortunate people, with kid gloves, with tremendous sensitivity. And the Ram writes the following: Chayav Adam lihizoyer b'yisomim v'almanos mipnei shenafsham shfelo l'ma'od. They're very sensitive. Verucham nemucha. It's very easy to slight them, an orphan or a widow, inadvertently, not realizing how much of a terrible pain you've caused them and suffering. Mushar manu aleim shenemar kol albona v'yosam lo ta'anun. And the Rambam goes on to say that someone who's maknit, he insults, or machas, he gets angry, or machiv, he causes suffering, anguish, psychological pain, lahach, lahen, to them, or rodavam, or somehow exert some sort of power over them, to subjugate them, or he's over belosas.
Where's this Rambam?
This is the Rambam in Hilchos Deos, Perek Vav Halacha Yud. But medvarim amurim, and now the Rambam has a limitation, a qualification. I would never have dreamt, within the context of this Rambam, the harsh, dramatic words that he applies to the context of Inui Almana V'Yasam, that the Rambam would say, B'medvar Mamurim. Maybe there's a limitation rule. Where's the exception? Says the Rambam, Bizman She'ino Som L'Tzorech Atzma. He gets benefit, and he's motivated purely selfishly and insults them. Aval, says the Rambam, ina osam, if he does it not, litzarch atzman, but l'shem shamayim, who is the Rambam talking about? Harav. It's the Rebbe who's doing this. Says the Rambam, kidei l'lamdam Torah, within the broader context of teaching them Torah. Oh, umnus. Oh, now, until now I would say the Rav is teaching Torah in the formal sense. He's imparting Torah knowledge. But the Rambam goes on. And he says, Olaho lichan b'derech yeshara. You see, the Rambam, in terms of Inui, and the license that a Rebbe has to possibly cause, let's call it, discomfiture to his Talmidim. I mean, I learned in such situations where, you could get it, if you... And I was in the mid-20s, you know what I'm saying? Right. Well, like Rav, like Talmud. So I can tell you that the Rambam should have possibly mentioned this Inui concept within the context of education somewhere in Hilchos Talmud Torah. But that, I think, the Rambam felt was a Dover Pashut. The Rambam wanted to tell us a much greater chiddush within the context of the relations, the sensitivity they have to display towards the almana, towards the yasam. We would never even dream that there's room for allowing any sort of insult or causing any sort of suffering to these people. And yet the Rambam wants to tell you that the Rav who's teaching Torah could do so. Olo lichan b'derech yeshar. Hareza mutar. The Rambam allows it. And I'm wondering, what's the matir over here? And the answer, I believe, has to be, with regard to lo lichan b'derech yeshara, that the Rav is in a very unique position vis-a-vis his Talmidim within the context of lo lichan b'derech yeshara. We're not addressing the universal rule of hocheach tochiach es hamisecha that's incumbent upon every Jew. We're talking about the very specific chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav within the broader context of Talmud Torah, to guarantee that the students are holchim b'derech tova, b'derech yeshara. And that separate mitzvah, separate chiyuv on the Rav is powerful enough, to our great surprise, to override and push off the iser of Inui Hayosam. And if that be the case, then perhaps we could come back full swing to our Rambam, having established that there's a separate chiyuv and a mitzvah incumbent upon the Rav to make sure this Talmud is a holich b'derech tova, and suggest that the Rambam here is referring not to other people, to the average Joe, the Jew in general, but he's referring to whom? Who has to be machzir the Talmud lemutav? The Rav himself. It's a chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav. Not only does the Rambam in Deos generate this conclusion that there's a separate chiyuv on the Rav, but the Rambam in Hilchos Rotzeach generates this conclusion. In Perek Hey Halacha Zayin, the Rambam writes, Harav hamakes talmido vehemiso b'shogeg, says the Rambam, potim in agolos. Why? Shenemar lachtov eitzim lidvar rishus yotza Rav haroes talmido sheharei hargo b'shas hasiyas ha-mitzvah. What mitzvah? You hit the Talmud and that's a mitzvah? The answer is yes. Only because you're a Rav who's interested in guaranteeing that Talmud should be a holech b'derech tova. It's a separate mitzvah incumbent upon the chacham, upon the Rav, to guide his students in a derech tova. And therefore, if he kills them inadvertently while he's involved in this great mitzvah, it's not dumya de chativas eitzim, and he's potter from goals. And frankly, Rabbos, I was very, very excited about this. But then I realized it's not necessarily so. Because all these cases that we're quoting are dealing with a Rav and a Talmud where the Talmud is already a Talmud. So within the course of that relationship, the Talmud, as the Rav perceives it, is holech b'derech lo tova, you have an obligation as his Rav to guide him b'derech tova. And that chiyuv is a special chiyuv miyuchad incumbent upon the Rav that could override other considerations. If he kills him b'shogi, he doesn't go to goats. If he's ma'ana yosam, mutter. However, our Rambam is addressing a whole different case. Our Rambam is addressing the issue of whom should we allow entry into the Beis HaMedrash. What are our standards for acceptance? And here the Rambam says, Machzirin oso lemuta. This is not L'fi Aniyus a chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav. He's not yet his Rav. He's a Rav of other Talmudim, but not of this one. So therefore, the Rambam uses the term machzirin, not machzir b'loshen yachid, but machzirin means it's incumbent upon the entire community within the context of Elcheach Tochia. Had the Rambam meant to reflect on the special, unique chiyuv incumbent upon the Rav, he should have said machzir, not machzirin. However, it comes out from this discussion, halach l'maisa, that it all depends. If the Rav has already been teaching this Talmud, for example, we spoke about a Talmud Shaharag is Magalin Rabbo Imo. He's already his Rav, and therefore he has special, unique chiyuvim in the context of that relationship as Rebbe to Talmud. In this case, it expresses itself into going to Golus. But if he hasn't picked him up yet, it's not yet Hikish Ba'Zachava, he has a right to say, this is not my special chiyuv. This chiyuv falls on all of Klal Yisrael. Midin Hocheach Tochiach. The Divrei Yirmiyahu brings as a source for the Rambam ein malamdin divrei Torah l'talmud shayaholech b'derech lo tova the Gemara in Makos, meaning that the Talmud, if he kills b'shogeg, the Rav is going to end up going with him to the Miklat. But although that might be the source for this Rambam, but if it is, then you might be misled to concluding that we're dealing with a situation where the Talmud is already a Talmud, and therefore the Rav has responsibilities that express themselves A, in his packing his bags and going to their mikla to teach his Talmud, B, to be Maksim Lemutav. I don't believe that that's true in the Pshat and the Rambam here. That's number 3. And finally, number 4, I'd like to discuss with you the word Divrei Torah. Take a look at the Rambam one more time. It's Hafochba V'Hafochba. The Rambam says, he says the following. He says, Ein Molamdim Divrei Torah El Talmud Hagun Noah B'Maisav. I emphasize one word because I think that word is totally superfluous. Let me reread the Rambam the way I would have written the Rambam. Ein Molamdim Torah El Talmud Hagun Noah B'Maisav. Why did the Rambam feel compelled to add the word Divrei Torah? The plot goes thicker because in the Sefer regarding a Rav, She'eino Holech B'derech Yeshara, the Rambam doesn't mention Divrei Torah. He could have said, Ein Mislamdim Mimenu Divrei Torah. He drops the ball on the word Divrei Torah. And I would like to show you another Rambam elsewhere in just one moment, where the Rambam goes out of his way to mention Divrei Torah, which has to do with Hirhur B'Divrei Torah, B'Beis HaMerchos, U'B'Beis HaKisei. Okay then? But let me get back to that in just a minute. I want to point out another distinction between the Reisha and the Sefer. In the Reisha, the Rambam speaks about a Talmud, whether he's Noah B'Maisav or not Noah B'Maisav. In the Sefer, with regard to the Rav, he speaks about whether he's Domel L'Malach Hashem Tzvakos, he speaks about Derech Yeshara, he speaks more in terms of Midos, he leaves out the word Maisa. Questions clear? So again, we want to answer up 2 diyukim that seem to differentiate the Reisha from the Sefer. The first diyuk is that in the Reisha, with regard to Malam Din Talmud Shein Hagun, it's Divrei Torah. The Ram drops Divrei Torah in the Sefer. The second difference is the Rambam in the Reisha emphasizes Maisav, whereas the Rambam in the Sefer with regard to Rav speaks about Derech Yeshara. And I would like to suggest an answer to this question based on another Rambam. The Rambam in Perek Gimel Milchus Kriyat Shema Halacha Zayin says afilu laharher belibo b'Torah. I left out a word deliberately. Bebeis hakise beis hamerchatz us. Now let's read the Rambam as he writes it. Afilu lahar belibo b'divrei Torah bebeis hakise beis hamerchatz asur. Why does the Rambam add the word divrei Torah? And I believe that this could give us a key to unlock many mysteries in the Rambam. What's the difference between Torah and divrei Torah? What is the addition of divrei add? And I would like to suggest the following. Divrei Torah refers to the Chefetz shel Torah, to the Torah itself. Torah itself is an entity. And I'm not just talking about a Sefer Torah, which is written on Klaf, Vidyo, and has Kedushas HaSefer. I'm talking even about abstract study of Torah Shebal Peh. There is such a thing as a Chefetz shel Torah. The Ram wants to say that if you think Torah thoughts in a bathhouse, you have vitiated, you have undermined the Kedusha, the sanctity of Divrei Torah, of the Chefetz shel Torah. Forget about your Isur as a person that you violated. Let's talk about the Kedushas HaTorah and maintaining its sanctity. And if this be the case, if that Rambam is the paradigm for Divrei Torah, let's go back to Ein Molamdim Divrei Torah El Talmud Hagum. Here too, I believe, at the beginning of Perek Dal, the Rambam is addressing the issue of Shmiras HaTorah, of being careful with Divrei Torah, with the Chefetz of Torah. The Rambam quotes the pasuk, no saying Kavod L'Ksil. What you're doing is you're taking the Torah and you're throwing it into a ksil. That itself is a violation. It's a desecration of Divrei Torah. And why? Because who is this Talmud Sheina Hagum? Do you remember our discussion earlier in the name of the Nahora D'Oraisa? Maisa of the Rambam says his Maisim are full of chait. He's a Ochel Nevelos L'Teyavon, if you will. Such a person, if you give him Divrei Torah, it's perhaps comparable to bringing Divrei Torah into a bathhouse. It's a desecration of Divrei Torah. Not so in the Sefer. The Sefer, with regard to a Rav she'eino hagun, Eino hagun, as we explained, he's not fulfilling v'halachta b'drachav. You know, the Rambam speaks about the Shvil HaZahav in Hilchos Deis, that we have to be right there in the Derech Yeshara in the middle. So this Rav is to one extreme or to the other. He's a little bit lopsided in Midos. There, I would suggest that there's no Chilul Divrei Torah. That's not the issue. Rather, the issue is the impact that the Rav could have on his Talmid. Therefore, it's the Limud Torah that we're concerned about in the Sefer. Not the Divrei Torah, but the act of Limud Torah. And here I want to mention the Divrei Yirmiyahu, because he created his own drasha here in this Rambam. And he says, Al Yevakesh Torah mi piu, mi piem v'lo mi pi sava. He says that the Isur is not to be Yevakesh Torah mi piu. Within the context of a holech b'derech, shalom b'derech yeshara, your contact with him, face to face, in the context of Limud Torah, is something that could cause influence and impact in a negative way. But to read his Sfarim, his Divrei Torah, you know, I was wondering, could I teach a Talmud she'eino hagun if he's not looking at me, and if he's in another room? Or let's say he hears a microphone or a tape. Or video. Or could a Rav she'eino hagun be taught, teaching, could I be taught by a Rav she'eino hagun if it's long distance? You know, he's sending me messages over the sound, with the sound waves, over the microphone, over the tapes. And I would say, Yesh L'cha. In the Reisha, when we're talking about taking Torah and desecrating it, Divrei Torah, by giving a sealed Torah, I don't care whether he's looking at me. I don't even care if he's in the same room as I am. But if I know that I'm giving Torah to him, then all the mechitzos that separate us, you know, like they speak about the daughters of Rashi, you know, how they taught Torah with mechitzos behind the mechitzos, all that's not going to make any bit of a difference. Because you're taking, again, if you're deliberate about it, you're taking Divrei Torah and you're shipping it off to the Ksil. But in the Sefer, says the Divrei Yirmiyahu, where the Torah says mi piu, is the pasuk saying mi piu v'lo, there's nothing puzzle. There's nothing treif about the Torah as a hefzer shel Torah. All right, the Rav is going b'derech she'eino tova, but his meisim are okay. He's not a as the Nahor Daraisa employs it, an ochel levelos l'teyavo. That's what we're talking about. Again, he's a little lopsided in valachta v'dracha.